You walk into your kitchen one day to find it in total disarray. You decide to start filming, documenting it for evidence, when out of the corner of your eye, you spot a hellish face peeking out at you from the top of a doorway. Take a look at this nightmarish monstrosity. Gotta say, guy in a costume or not, I do not like this, and I would not like running into it in the dark, in the day, inside, outside, just no thank you all around. This video was posted to TikTok by Fastby Tess Horror with a description reading, Muslim traveler finds himself face to face with a monstrous creature lurking in the shadows. We don't have a lot of context for this footage, just that the guy behind the camera supposedly came across this gargoyle looking thing leering down at him from a ledge, and the man, completely shaken and petrified, started praying, and you can hear the terror in his voice as he does so. I find this thing deeply unsettling. This is what I kind of picture a genuine demonic creature looking like, although a lot of commenters say it looks like Frank from Donnie Darko, which, I mean, you know what, hey, that doesn't take anything away from it, still makes this creepy as hell. A man named Cody had started noticing odd things going on in his house one day, so he pulled out his phone and started recording. He'd noticed the light in the fridge and bathroom flickering. He also heard water running, so he peeked around the corner of the bathroom and, to his complete shock and confusion, found that the bathroom sink was on. And when a door behind him suddenly shut on its own, he really got freaked out and decided to step outside. He rang up his girlfriend, who urged him to just stay out of the house. Either there was an intruder or something else was going on, but none of it could be good. But Cody went back in to keep filming anyway, and suddenly found the place was a complete mess. Chairs had been knocked over, cupboards were open, so he immediately changed his mind and rightfully left the house again. And 2 hours later, he went back in, took a look in every single room to see if there's anyone there. He didn't find anything. That is, until he went back and looked at the footage that he'd taken later on. While he'd been filming his kitchen after having come back into the house that first time, he'd briefly panned across to his daughter's doorway. But while watching the footage back, he noticed something in the top right-hand corner, so he paused and zoomed in, revealing this. A ghostly-looking face peering out from above the doorway. This chilled him to the bone, and it's easy to see why. There are some very dubious ghost videos and pictures out there, blurry, often hard to make out, but this looks legitimately terrifying. It's clearly a face, but it does not look human. Speaking of creepy as hell, be glad you don't live in the same building as this next guy. In this short clip, we see a man filming a staircase, lit up by the light from his phone. On the stairs is a man rushing up to the camera. Clearly his intentions aren't good. Either he's just trying to freak out our cameraman, or he's got something worse in mind. Luckily, the cameraman manages to shut the door before the crazed guy manages to get too close, but then, for whatever reason, he decides to open the door back up again to see if the dude's still there, I guess, and it doesn't look like it at first. You know, all we see is the dark, empty stairwell, but in true horror movie fashion, just as the camera peeks around the corner, we get this. It's immediately clear that there is something very wrong with this guy's eyes. Was this dude on something? Is the video just a hoax? Or was this man possessed by a demon or a djinn? Talk about a demon realizing they're being filmed. This thing is right up close, staring directly into this person's car. Take a look. Would you just sit there continuing to film this, or would you be tearing out of there? I know what camp I'm in. I'd be gone. Those are not the eyes of someone who needs directions or wants to be friendly in any way. Those are the eyes of someone whose mouth is about to stretch 3 times its normal size and devour your face in a single chomp. She's almost still as a statue, completely unblinking, which is really what makes the whole thing so downright chilling. But take note of her eyes, just ever so slightly shifting to the person behind the camera. It's such a slight little movement, but just sends shivers up your spine. The fact that she looks so dead-eyed, just staring off into the distance, and then slowly switches to look right down the barrel of the camera, right at us as the viewers. it's just hard not to avert your eyes a little bit. The surveillance camera ghoul. This footage was taken by a man named Mario Lara, who captured something deeply harrowing on camera in his store in Mexico. Take a look. Leading up to this video, Lara had begun to notice strange things going on in his store. He'd arrive in the morning to find things out of place, especially a piñata which would repeatedly be found on the floor, and one morning it was found in a totally different spot than he'd left it the previous night. He started to think someone was sneaking into the shop after closing and messing with things, so he set up a security camera. One night he gets an alert on his phone. The camera was detecting motion. The last thing he was expecting to see, though, was this ghoulish figure poking out from a pile of piñatas. It's hard to make that sentence sound ominous. I mean, piñatas, they're just so joyous. Well, unfortunately for Mario, though, things weren't joyous in the shop. Things just continued getting worse. His security camera continued picking up odd footage at night, like piñatas spinning around on their own. One of his power drills, which was sitting on the floor, seemingly turned on by itself one day, nearly hitting his foot. It seemed like whatever this entity was, it was not looking to be friendly, despite being surrounded by festive piñatas. This next video comes from a woman named Mandy Mary, who spotted something incredibly creepy on camera. Take a look at this. Did you catch that? It happens very fast, but as the lights flicker, you can spot what looks to be this shadowy figure peering out from the doorway, and it's definitely not there when the lights are on. Now, why did the lights flicker? Well, Mandy's son had flicked them himself. Mandy wrote in the description of the video, "This video is from my back house. My son was behind me when I recorded this. We were creeped out as we've seen a dark figure back there many times. So thought it would be a good idea to record there at night. We videotaped and he tried to spook me by flicking the light. The moment he turned off the light, you could see the outside light from the window. Within this outside light, you can see a dark shadow figure standing there. This wasn't us. Some of the people I've shown this to said, 'It's your son.' I said, 'No way. He was right behind me, and that shadow figure was in the middle of the window, reflection, not the door we were at. So no way it was him. Every night I see dark shadows walking back and forth, making my backlight sensor flip on and off. Also, about a month ago, something shook my door so hard it shook my entire hallway.'" Speaking of hallways, this next person was attacked on camera by what appears to be some invisible force in the hallway. Take a look. Yeah, damn right, turn around and go back where you came. Whoever this guy was visiting, whatever plans he had at the end of that hallway, they were crossed off his list as soon as he hit the ground. What in the hell happened there? This CCTV security camera footage was taken in what looks to be the hallway of some sort of facility, like a doctor's office. Could also be an apartment, but it's hard to tell. You'll notice that before the guy even falls down and gets dragged, this black shadowy shape starts to form, and once it drags the guy a few feet down the hall, it fades back away, releasing the man, who rightly gets up and books it back down the hall. This next one has to be one of my favorite spooky internet videos. Some have compared this creepy woman to a witch, others have said it may be a djinn. Whatever she is though, she's downright creepy, and this just makes for a very unsettling watch. The video was apparently shot in Saudi Arabia. It shows a man driving on a narrow, empty road. As he's driving, we can clearly spot this strange, hunched figure in the distance. The figure moves in this really unnatural way, hobbling around. It's also hard to make out where its head is because it's all hunched. It just looks completely wrong. And the man filming thinks so too, because you can clearly hear how terrified he is. He sounds completely panicked, even on the verge of tears. Honestly, his reaction is kind of what makes the video. At one point he tries to reverse away from the figure, but the road is so narrow and winding that he can't move very quickly, and the witch-like figure just keeps gaining on him, waddling towards the car with that unsettling gait, getting closer and closer, but never deciding to get right up close. It's like she's just toying with him. Unless you've been hiding under a rock for the past couple years, which based on some of the videos on this list, I can understand why you would, you've probably heard of the Serbian dancing lady craze. People coming across lone women dancing in the street late at night for seemingly no reason. Take a look at this. Sorry, not sorry. That one gets you? Look, it's spooky season now. You gotta be ready for this sort of thing. Gotta be on your toes. All right, well, I don't think it gets any more classically demonic looking than this image here. The photo shows a large winged figure. It was taken in Phoenix, Arizona by a man named Richard Christensen in 2017. He wasn't sure what he captured, and neither was anyone else. So you wake up one morning to find holes in your garage door. You check your security camera to see what's going on, and while skimming through the footage, you see this. Now, I can't find the source of the original video here, so if any of you can, please let me know down below. But my God, whatever the hell this thing is, it doesn't appear to be human. I think if I saw holes in a wooden door in my backyard, I might think it was a raccoon, maybe a large rat. But Gollum? I think that's the last thing I'd be expecting or wanting to see. The pig demon. Take a listen to this before I give you all the backstory. Can you make that out? Sounds a lot like someone saying, I have the body of a pig. Which wouldn't be so freaky if anyone in the room had said that they remembered hearing it, or that they'd said it themselves. But nobody did. It wasn't until they looked over the footage later that this audio came up. This video was uploaded to YouTube by Devin Raymond, who wrote in the description that the recording was an EVP, or electronic voice phenomenon, picked up in a secret location during his tenure as a special guest and resident expert with a group that he can't disclose. Now, the EVP on its own is pretty disconcerting, but check out what they caught on camera later on. While filming into a dark crevice, they picked up this still image right here. Definitely would have been disturbing in person, or even going back and looking at the footage you'd taken earlier, knowing you were right there with whatever this thing was. But I like the fact that this demonic spirit or ghost or whatever it may have been would just announce to everyone, I have the body of a pig. You look at it, it's like, I guess, yeah, you do look a little piggish. This next video comes to us from Reddit user Kipper2. Take a look. Now, pretty much everyone in the comments, including me, is saying this is a reflection on the window coming from inside the house. And while you could say it's just someone standing behind the camera person, take a closer look at the reflection. That looks like the demon face that shows up at the end of Skinamarink. Just what the hell is that? It looks almost like two faces kind of attached together. Kipper2 also gave some context in the description, writing, a family member of mine shared this live photo she took of a deer in her and her husband's front yard. The two of them lived alone in this old southern farmhouse, previously owned by an older gentleman who had passed away in the home. She'd complained a few times about hearing walking in the attic. It wasn't long after this photo that they decided to move out. And yeah, best not to take your chances and just get out of there. See what happens when you mess with Ouija boards? Take a look at this. This video was posted to YouTube by Ouija Warning, a very apt name for a channel with a video like this. In the 2 or so minute clip, we watch as a group of girls and dudes mess with a Ouija board. One woman in the video, the one who ends up freaking out at the end, is laughing and joking the whole time as the planchette begins spelling out Zozo. She then asks if the spirit's name is Zozo, and when the planchette moves to yes, she begins to laugh again. Only this time, her laughter becomes less joyful and more hysterical, in a pained, panicked sort of way. Now, I've talked about Zozo on the channel before, a demonic entity said to haunt Ouija boards. An entity so malicious it's been known to cause physical harm on those who are unfortunate enough to run into it. Basically, if you're playing with a Ouija board and you end up contacting an entity and the letter Z or Z, depending on where you live, comes up at all, just stop right there. It's such a rare letter, unless you asked it what its favorite anime is and the words dragon and ball came before, just don't take your chances. The Valentine Ghost. This footage was taken in the Valentine Museum in Victor, New York. Take a look. On April 21st of 2006, paranormal investigation was being carried out at the museum. Now, the quality of this footage isn't great, but you do see what looks like a semi-translucent figure walking out of the shadows and past the camera. This has actually become a rather famous piece of footage in paranormal circles as well, because apparently it's never been fully definitively explained. According to the New York Haunted Houses website, the historic Valentine Museum was built in 1879, originally called Valentine Hall. It's a 5-story building which is now a museum with thousands of old artifacts and a good number of ghosts. Spirits have been known to play an old-fashioned music box, move tools around in the basement, and people have even seen full-blown apparitions. So, is this strange figure in the video one of these ghosts? Let me know your thoughts down below. This image right here comes from Reddit user According Pangolin84, who writes, "I'm not familiar with ghosts and paranormal things, so I don't know the logic behind anything, but I came across this old photo I have from a haunted mansion in Utah. This place was a hot spot to break into during high school, and my friends did it and wanted a photo while I stayed back in the car. The figure in the back is what I suspect to be some kind of ghost. I only had 2 friends go in the house for a photo." The Reddit user also gave some context about this haunted mansion itself in a follow-up post, writing, "It's called the Benjamin Pump House in Utah. It has no electricity and is pretty much empty on the inside besides garbage. Growing up, I heard a lot of stories about scary interactions in the house, people reporting footsteps and the feelings of being watched. As far as my friends and what they felt, all I can recall is them talking about what sounded like someone walking through the brush around the house, and there was a weird creaking that also circled around the house, but nothing in relation to being watched or feeling like there was someone else in there." This image here was shared by Reddit user PositiveCable1487, who writes, "Earlier this month, my sister and her partner went to the Stanley Hotel. Don't know the backstory on the mirror, but apparently there are many reports of sightings in it. This is the photo my sister took. She said the mirror was squeaky clean in person, no smudges." Now, this image may not be all that creepy on its own, but the Stanley Hotel definitely is. Let me tell you fine folks about it. The Stanley Hotel is famously the hotel that inspired Stephen King to write The Shining. He'd been snowed in there with his family in 1974 while on a trip to the Rocky Mountains National Park. They happened to be the only guests there and found the place rather eerie. And King isn't the only guest to have found the place unsettling. Tons of people have reported spooky encounters at the hotel, like the ghost of a woman named Mrs. Wilson, former chambermaid, said to haunt room 217. Staff have reported hearing sounds of people dancing and laughing in the ballroom, only to find nobody there. Guests will often report seeing dark figures standing over their beds at night, and it's said that the spirit of the former landowner, Lord Dunraven, will often be seen staring out the window of room 407. From TikToker Ahab Kasmaya1 comes a terrifying encounter he had while exploring an abandoned building. He's filming down a dark hallway when suddenly a knocking sound is heard off camera, and when the urban explorer pans to take a look, this is what happened. Now, instead of screaming at the top of his lungs and running away at top speed, the brave man begins praying instead, and the entity retreats back into the shadows. Which, you know what, hey, seemed to work great and all, but here's another idea: just don't be there in the first place. You win every fight you walk away from at the end of the day. Reddit user HealthyMagician895 posted this series of images here, along with a description reading, "I was messing around in my mom's room taking a video when my friend pointed out something at the corner of the door. At the end of the video, I went back to the mirror, but it was gone. Can somebody explain this? I'm genuinely creeped out." And yeah, fair enough. I'd be genuinely creeped out too if I saw that thing peeking out at me from the doorway. Here's what's interesting about this photo too. It reminds me a lot of a video I shared in part 1. If you'd like to watch part 1, by the way, link is in the description. But just for a quick comparison, check this out. Yeah, pretty eerily similar. Even the positioning. What do you all think though? Hoax? Or is there a ghoulish demon thing crawling around people's houses and peering out at them from the tops of door frames? I certainly hope not. Imagine hearing a noise in your hallway at 3 a.m., going out into your hallway to check it out, and spotting this. This one comes from TikToker Official Empty Alien. I don't even care that's not real. I had to throw it on here because that is some fuel for your nightmares right there. The long fingers slowly creeping into frame. I think that's what really does it for me. This is pretty much the exact face I'd scare the crap out of myself imagining it as a youngster popping up in a window or glaring at me from the bottom of the stairs at night. It's kind of uncanny actually too. The white face, the glare, the big eyes and the teeth, I don't know, it's always what I'd imagine. The incubus and succubus, two of the most infamous demons that disguise themselves as humans. These demons have been part of folklore for centuries. The incubus is a male demon that usually takes the form of a man to seduce women. It's said that the incubus visits women while they're asleep, using its human disguise to get close. As you can imagine, an encounter with an incubus is often described as extremely disturbing. Women would wake up feeling exhausted or traumatized with no clear memory of what had happened. Sometimes the incubus is blamed for nightmares and sleep paralysis. Then you have the succubus, the female counterpart of the incubus, taking on the appearance of an attractive woman to seduce men, often in their dreams. These seductive demons are known for their charm and incredibly attractive human disguises, making them hard to resist. But just like the incubus, the succubus uses her human guise to drain the life energy or vitality from her victims. Men who encounter a succubus might feel drained or sickly afterward, and in some tales they even suffer from mysterious illnesses or even death. We've all seen these things in movies and TV, even when they're not actually referred to outright as an incubus or a succubus. The trope of a seductive entity that lures in its victims before turning on them is pretty common. I mean, take your classic vampire, for instance, or that scene from The Shining where the hot lady Jack Nicholson is making out with turns into an old rotting hag. Scarring. Aswang is an umbrella term for malevolent creatures in Filipino folklore. So there are different types. You have your witch type creatures, vampire type monsters, a whole bunch, but almost all of them shapeshift. By day, an aswang might blend right into regular society, but come nightfall, the aswang transforms into its true monstrous form, whatever it may be. I think my favorite has to be the viscera sucker, which is even ghastlier than it sounds. These demons take the form of a beautiful woman by day, and by night, they grow wings and detach their upper torso from their legs before flying out into the night in search of food. Their diet consisting of people's internal organs, which they suck out with their long tongues. They especially love preying on pregnant women. These creatures are said to not only take on very convincing human forms, but are also skilled at mimicking human behavior. You might find yourself living next to someone who's actually an aswang without ever realizing it. This next one is a lot more subtle, but genuinely creepy. The doppelganger. So this is a word you've probably all heard before, often used to describe someone who looks a lot like you, like, oh damn, he looks like your doppelganger. But in German folklore, a doppelganger is actually a malevolent demon. A supernatural look-alike or double of a living person who looks exactly like you, but of course, isn't you. The doppelganger is traditionally seen as an omen of bad luck or impending doom. In some stories, seeing your double can mean that something terrible is about to happen to you or someone you care about. And as you can imagine, doppelgangers are said to use their appearance to impersonate or deceive. In some legends, a doppelganger can replace a person, kind of an invasion of the body snatchers type of thing, but not all stories about doppelgangers are malevolent, and sometimes they're seen as entities that appear to warn or challenge the person that they resemble. Huli Jing, or fox spirits, from Chinese mythology are known for their ability to shapeshift, and they often use this power to take on human forms. A Huli Jing can transform into a stunningly beautiful woman, which they sometimes use to charm and seduce men. Fox spirits aren't always malevolent, but the stories where they are will often revolve around them using their human disguises to trick or manipulate their victims. Nowadays, Huli Jing is an insult in Mandarin and Cantonese, a very specific term used to describe a woman who gets involved with married men. But as I said, the folklore surrounding Huli Jing isn't always bad. These fox spirits are often associated with magical powers and have a range of different abilities. In some tales, they're depicted as being more neutral or even benevolent, helping humans or protecting certain places. And if a nine-tailed fox spirit looks familiar to you, that's because these creatures also made their way into Japanese mythology, which of course led to fox demons showing up in anime like Naruto, Inuyasha, and a whole long list of others. Next, we have Cheneke. These little guys come from Mexican folklore, particularly from the Yucatan Peninsula. They're tiny, mischievous little beings that looks like old men or women, often just a few feet tall. They're kinda elf-like. Picture Dobby. Their main goal is to play tricks on people, especially in the jungle or forest. Cheneke are known for leading travelers astray, making them lose their way or forget where they're going. If you've ever heard of someone getting lost in the woods for no apparent reason, especially if they happened to be in Mexico, the Cheneke might be the culprit. They love to mess with people, making them feel disoriented or causing them to wander around aimlessly. One of their favorite tricks is to make it seem like time has passed when it actually hasn't, or vice versa. Stories of people walking through the forest and suddenly realizing hours have gone by but swearing it only felt like minutes have been attributed to these creatures for centuries. But Cheneke aren't usually harmful in a physical sense. Their antics can be annoying or unsettling, but I'd rather deal with one of these than a winged gut-sucking asswang. But if you really would prefer a casual stroll through the woods without any shenanigans, some believe that offering small gifts like food or tobacco can help keep them at bay. Jinns come from Arabic folklore and Islamic beliefs. They're often known as genies here in the West, which automatically makes you picture a friendly blue guy popping out of a bottle, but in the original context they're a lot more complicated and can be pretty terrifying. Jinn are supernatural creatures that exist alongside humans. They're known for having free will, just like us, which means they can be good, bad, or anywhere in between. And they take on many different forms, from animals like snakes or insects to humans. This makes them particularly sneaky and dangerous. They might pretend to be human to manipulate people, or in some cases just for their own amusement. For example, a jinn might disguise itself as a friendly stranger to gain someone's trust and then lead them into danger, or they might take on the appearance of someone familiar to simply mess with their victims. There are stories of jinn even mating with humans and having offspring, and in your more kind of familiar demonic sense, they're known to possess people's bodies as well. Rakshasa can be found in Buddhism, Jainism, and Hindu mythology. They're often depicted as powerful demons or evil spirits with a taste for chaos and destruction. They can change shape at will, which is bad considering the fact that they are known to like eating humans. Unlike creatures like Cheneke, who are more involved in playful trickery, Rakshasa have a much more sinister vibe. They're often portrayed being very cunning and manipulative, using their shape-shifting ability to deceive and harm their victims. One of the most famous Rakshasa in Hindu epic literature is Ravana from the Ramayana, a powerful demon king with 10 heads, often depicted as evil, but very sophisticated at the same time. A learned scholar and capable ruler, Rakshasas like Ravana often have very big ambitions, which can cause major problems in the world. Their ability to change shape makes them difficult to detect and even harder to defeat. Do you have a fear of snakes? If so, you'd never want to cross paths with Nure Onna, a yokai from Japanese folklore and mythology. There are tons of different yokai which are sort of like Japanese demons. This particular yokai, though, in its true form, is a gigantic snake with a woman's head. Basically a combination of a serpent and the ghost girl from The Ring. Nightmares for days. You know when people say that what you picture in your own head is always going to be scarier than something that can ever be described or shown on screen? That's just not the case when it comes to Japan. This isn't even remotely close to being the weirdest or scariest type of yokai, but it's still effectively terrifying. I don't know, just they always find a way to make something extra scary and bizarre. The humanish head of a Nure Onna often has yellow eyes, a forked tongue, and long matted black hair that's always wet, like it's just slithered out of a river dripping with water. But Nure Onna are deceptive. They don't just show up as these horrific snake monsters right out the gate. Anyone with good sense would just turn around and run long before getting close. Instead, these yokai often take the form of a regular woman at first. They might pretend to be in distress, maybe holding what looks like an infant, or just crying for help, and once they've got you close enough, they reveal their true form, shifting from that harmless woman to this. and at that point, it's usually too late to get away. Jiangshi, these creatures come from Chinese folklore and are often translated as hopping vampires, which sounds cute, but it's not. They're a bit different from the usual vampire stories you might be familiar with. Instead of the suave, seductive type, Jiangshi is more of a creepy undead creature that moves around by hopping. They're kind of more like zombies that can't walk properly, so they just hop to get around. It sounds kind of silly, and in some of the movies they show up in, it kind of looks funny, but at the same time, it's creepy. Something about that surreal image of a pale, gaunt, undead creature in Qing Dynasty clothing just hopping around just makes my skin crawl a little. Jiangshi are also said to have a stiff, unnatural posture thanks to rigor mortis. Their fingers are capped with long, sharp fingernails, which they use to scratch or claw at their victims, and they're very aggressive, feeding on the life force of living people. They're said to be drawn to the warmth of the living and will attack anyone they come across. Because they're technically undead too, they can only be killed through specific methods, but luckily they have a lot of weaknesses and can be easily distracted. They're terrified of their own reflection. They usually leave at the sound of a rooster's call because that means daylight is approaching, and they have an aversion to sunlight just like your standard vampires. You can use a variety of talismans to keep them at bay as well, and if you drop a bunch of coins on the ground, they'll often stop what they're doing to bend down and count them. Finishing off with some Celtic folklore, we have the puka. Pukas are shapeshifters who can take on many different forms. It's known for being both mischievous and malevolent, which makes it a bit of a wild card when it comes to encounters. The puka can transform into a wide variety of animals, but it's often described as a dark horse-like creature with glowing eyes. It might also take the form of a goat, rabbit, or, of course, a human, but their human forms aren't always very convincing. They often retain some animal traits like pointy ears or tails, dead giveaways that you're not dealing with a real person. When it shows up as a horse though, it's said to be especially dangerous because it can trick people into riding it, and once you're on its back, it'll just gallop off wildly, taking you on a really terrifying ride. But puka encounters rarely ever end in death. For the most part, they act more as tricksters than serious physical threats. It's known to play mind games, causing confusion and fear. It might lead people astray, causing them to get lost or leading them to dangerous places. But some of these creatures also choose to warn people of danger rather than lead them into it. I guess when it comes to demons and paranormal entities, you got good ones and bad ones, just like you got good people and pieces of crap. Who do you have to blame when you're sick? Other than the person who got you sick, that is. Well, if you know anything about ancient Sumerian mythology and like blaming demons for your problems, then a sag may be responsible for your 14th trip to the toilet in the span of a day. A sag is a pretty nasty demon said to cause sickness. He's a hideous creature born from the underworld. So busted looking is he that his presence alone is said to make fish in the rivers boil, and one glimpse at the entity can cause people to fall sick and die on the spot. What's worse is that he doesn't come alone. He has an entire army of demonic offspring at his back. But how did he manage to procreate, being that people can't even look at him without dropping dead? Well, Asag didn't make love with people. He had his offspring with the mountains themselves, all the mountains in the world. So his sons and daughters are part hideous demon, part hideous rock creature.
If you've ever seen Game of Thrones, I have a feeling you're gonna like this next one. It's called a Draugr, and honestly you'd have a hard time convincing me that it wasn't the inspiration behind White Walkers. The demon comes from Nordic folklore. It's an ancient undead monster known to rise up from its grave and attack the living. Oh, and it's most active at night and in the winter. Sound familiar? When a person dies and is buried in the ground, it is believed that they will turn into a Draugr if they either practiced black magic, were executed, died an accidental death, or were buried outside a churchyard. I know, it's a broad spectrum and it doesn't make a lot of sense, but that is the criteria according to the Nordic folklore. Along with attacking the living, Draugrs have been known to climb onto the top of people's homes and stomp on their roofs to keep them from getting a good night's rest. If a person inside the home home becomes restless and decides to leave their house, this demon will kill them. Quite easily, might I add, because they are incredibly strong. When there are no humans around, these Game of Thrones-esque zombie demons have also been known to eat livestock and tear apart fences and barns. Oh, and one more thing, the only way to kill them is to cut their heads off, burn them, and then scatter their ashes in the ground. It's a process, but probably worth it considering how aggressive these particular demons tend to be.
The Agitar is not an entity you want to run into. Much like a sag, just the sight of her alone can cause you to drop dead. Agitar comes from Finnish mythology, known not only as the devil of the woods, but the mother of the devil himself. Agitar is incredibly ugly and evil, spreading diseases and pestilence wherever she goes, and she often takes the form of a serpent. She's accompanied by them as well, and some stories even say she can control them. Snakes come up a lot in ancient myths about demonic entities. Unsurprisingly, people still fear snakes today, but especially back in the day, snakes were often seen as symbols of evil and poison in cultures across the world. People in ancient Finland believed Agitar could bring bad luck and misfortune just by being near. She was blamed for all sorts of problems, from poor harvests to outbreaks of sickness. If things started going wrong, it was said that Agitar was probably lurking nearby, making life difficult just for the sake of it, as demons do.
In Japanese folklore, there is something called yokai, which directly translated means strange apparitions. They are a class of supernatural entities and spirits whose behavior can range from benevolent and kind to mischievous all the way to malevolent and incredibly dangerous. One such malevolent and dangerous yokai is the rokurokubi, the apparition of a woman with sharp teeth, a taste for human flesh, and a neck that can stretch out of her shoulders and slither around the room like a 50-foot long snake. One nurse, we'll call her Jackie, shared an encounter with a rokurokubi, claiming that she had been attacked by one while working at a hospital in Japan. One night, one of Jackie's patients called her over to say that a woman wearing a red kimono had been standing beside her bed the whole night, but she couldn't see the woman's face because it had been covered with long black hair. The next night, a different patient told Jackie almost the same thing, except this time, the woman's neck was stretched up so high that her head was touching the ceiling. The nurse wasn't convinced, and the hospital wing she was working at was pretty much empty, so she decided to lay down for a quick cat nap. She awoke to a phone call from her mother in the middle of the night who said, "Honey, are you okay? I had a terrible dream that you fell asleep at the hospital and a creepy woman was watching you as you slept." Upon hearing this, Jackie dropped her phone, and when she went to pick it up, she saw 2 feet underneath her bed. And when she looked up, the outstretched neck of a woman smiling from ear to ear with dead eyes and razor-sharp teeth. I guess Jackie fainted because the next thing she knew, she woke up surrounded by hospital staff. She quit her job that day and hasn't returned to the hospital since. And honestly, I don't blame her. I'm covered in goosebumps just from reciting the story. I couldn't imagine living it.
Now, we can't talk about demons without mentioning at least another yokai. There are tons of these creatures and entities that fall under the yokai umbrella in Japanese folklore. They include demons, ghosts, monsters, and there's loads of types of each. The Enko are river-dwelling yokai, resembling monkeys. Don't let their appearance deceive you into thinking the worst they'll do is play a little trick on you though. These are some violent, sadistic animals right here, and tales about them get very graphic. Enko are said to live in rivers and along the seashore. They're kinda like kappa, who are more like turtle creatures, but these ones are way worse. They're excellent swimmers, and if you happen to come across one while taking a dip, it's probably gonna be game over for you in the worst way. See, these creatures love eating human liver, fresh human liver. Their method of obtaining it, shoving their arm right up their victim's rear end and pulling it out. The worst rectal exam you'll ever receive.
Have you ever woken up in the middle of the night only to discover that you can't move your arms or legs? Not only that, but you can't seem to muster up the ability to make a sound, and so when you see a dark scraggly demon lurking at the foot of your bed or sitting directly on top of you, all you can do is sit there and stare at it, feeling nothing but pure terror. Well, if you have, it sounds like you've been visited by a Phi Am. The Phi Am has its roots in Thai folklore, where it is believed to be the lesser known cause of the well-known phenomenon of sleep paralysis. Phi Ams have been known to sit on their victims' chests in the middle of the night, restricting their movement and instilling fear into their souls, and in extreme cases, crushing their lungs entirely and taking their lives. It is said that the creature tends to haunt men more than women, and so in some places where the demons are more common, men have actually been known to don traditional women's bedtime clothing to avoid being haunted by the demon. Small price to pay for not having your lungs crushed.
The Alp is a creepy creature from German folklore, and it's the stuff of nightmares, literally. Known for causing horrible nightmares, the Alp is said to sit on its victims' chests in the middle of the night, causing the sleeper to wake up in a panic, unable to breathe or move as they're crushed under the weight of the creature. Yes, this is another sleep paralysis demon. The Alp is usually described as a small elf-like being, but it can shape-shift into other forms, usually animals like cats, dogs, or snakes. It's also said to sometimes ride a horse. The Alp also wears a special cap that gives it the power to become invisible, sneak into people's homes unseen. This is just another one of the many demonic entities people used to try and explain sleep paralysis back in the day. And when people would wake up feeling terrified, unable to move, with a heavy pressure on their chest, having a hallucination of something sitting on top of them or lurking at the foot of their beds, it's no wonder people thought there were malevolent demons roaming around in the night. I can only imagine how horrifying it would have been to grow up around this time. I mean, I've had sleep paralysis, and if my mother told me that it was thanks to a demon, I would just never go to bed again.
The Mongolian death worm demon is honestly just gross. It's gross. It's gross to look at, it's gross to think about, and yet here I am talking about it to you because I respect you enough to know that you are brave enough to handle the gross demon worm. And I'm proud of you for that. Now, while many zoologists believe that the idea of the Mongolian demon worm comes from an exaggeration of real snake and worm sightings, Mongolian locals to this day claim otherwise, and many of them say that they have actually seen this giant creature for themselves and just narrowly escaped its vicious attack. You see, Mongolian death worms are said to have a large circular row of incredibly sharp teeth and venom that acts like acid. My advice, if you're in Mongolia, avoid the desert. And maybe you will make it out alive.
This demon is about as evil and demonic as a demon can be. Lamashtu, another demon from Sumerian and Mesopotamian mythology. An entity with the head of a lion and long, sharp talons and claws like a bird. Lamashtu really doesn't have any redeeming qualities. Some of her hobbies include, but are not limited to, messing with women while they're pregnant, kidnapping newborns, sucking out men's BLOOD, infesting rivers and lakes, spreading disease and sickness in general, ruining crops, and giving people nightmares. Lamashtu was so terrifyingly evil that people would often try to ward her off with the help of another demon, Pazuzu, Lamashtu's arch nemesis. The Batman to her Joker, the He-Man to her Skeletor, the list goes on, you get my point.
Imagine, you're walking home one night, it's dark, and you're all alone. All of a sudden you look up and realize you're standing face to face with the most beautiful woman you've ever seen. She has piercing eyes, shiny black hair, and then she starts to smile, exposing 2 rows of red-stained, razor-sharp teeth. You fall backwards to see that something is missing. Her body. This woman isn't a woman at all, just a floating head with half a neck and a trail of guts and organs hanging out. You have stumbled across a karasu hungry for human flesh. There are many different stories regarding the origin of this creature who hunts at night and then returns to her headless body in the morning to go about her day indistinguishable from any other woman except for her tired expression. The most popular is that the karasu was a princess living in Cambodia in the 15th century who was engaged to a prince but in love with someone else, a commoner. Eventually she was caught in her affair and sentenced to death by fire. She consulted a witch who cast a spell of protection for the young princess, but unfortunately the spell didn't kick in until the fires had almost reached the young woman's head. Other stories claim that the demon is a woman who broke a deal with another demon or a woman who made a grave mistake while practicing black magic. However she came to be, people in Thai culture say that those who consult with demons or practice similar magic are doomed to meet the same fate as the princess when they die.
Starting off this list in our number 10 spot, we have Ariana Grande. This is a terrifying paranormal encounter had by the super sweet Ariana Grande. Back in the Yours Truly era for the star, car while in Kansas City, she and some friends took a visit to Stull Cemetery, which legend claims is one of the gates to hell on Earth. This turned out to be a more haunting visit than the group had bargained for, however, as the singer recounted that suddenly they, quote, felt this sick, overwhelming feeling of negativity over the whole car, and we smelled sulfur, which is the sign of a demon, and there was a fly in the car randomly, which is another sign of a demon. I rolled down the window before we left and said, "We apologize, we didn't mean to disrupt your peace." Things only got more spooky for Ari though when she later tried to send her manager a picture of the cemetery. This photo she attempted to send came back with an error saying that the file couldn't be sent due to the fact that it was 666 megabytes. In our number 9 spot today we have Miley Cyrus. In an interview with Elle UK, Miley Cyrus opened up about a haunted apartment that she and her family stayed in during her 2009 European tour. She said, quote, "It was seriously so terrifying. It used to be an old bakery and they turned it into an apartment building, and I was having really crazy dreams and really scary things, and one night my little sister, it sounds crazy to tell you, but she was standing in the shower and all of a sudden I hear her scream. I run in there and the water had somehow flipped to hot, but it wasn't like the water had just changed, the knob had turned, but she hadn't turned it and it was burning her. She was really red." She continued on with the chilling tale by saying, quote, "Before I felt this, I thought I had seen a little boy sitting on the sink watching me take a shower, so I felt really freaked out. I was sitting there the next night and maybe I'm crazy, but I could have sworn I could see this little boy sitting there on the sink caking his feet. My mom was getting mad that we were looking into it because she thought it was going to scare Noah, so then my aunt, who we hadn't told about this, comes in and she starts freaking out. She's like, I have no idea what happened, but I left the apartment and I came back and all of the doors and windows were open. I locked the apartment." She finished off her creepy story by saying that there were a few more strange things that happened, and this all was enough for her to swear off ever staying in that place again. Miley believes the haunting ties back into the history of the building and says that the apparition she saw matches up with who once lived there. In our number 8 spot today we have Adele. The haunting story of Adele starts off when she decided that she had had enough of fans and paparazzi outside of her London home, so she decided to purchase and move to a new home in Sussex. This house, in its past life before housing the Grammy Award winner, is said to have been a convent. Despite the change, Adele continued to be visited by people she didn't want in her home, but this time the visitors were otherworldly. The singer claimed that she began to hear noises that she was unable to find the source of. Things in her home also began to fall for seemingly no apparent reason, and apparently these paranormal encounters made Adele so unsettled that she had to hire a bodyguard to stay in her house full time. Hopefully these plaguing hauntings have since stopped, but only Adele knows for sure. In our number 7 spot today we have Ozzy Osbourne. One of the most famous rock stars ever, Ozzy has long been connected to the occult. I mean, Ozzy, Prince of Darkness, didn't just come from nowhere. Aside from the rumors, however, Ozzy has been fairly open about his personal connection to the devil. In a 1984 issue of Hit Parader, Ozzy said, quote, "I really wish I knew why I've done some of the things I've done over the years. Sometimes I think that I'm possessed by some outside spirit. A few years ago, I was convinced of that. I thought I truly was possessed by the devil. I remember sitting through The Exorcist a dozen times, saying to myself, yeah, I can relate to that." He even has expressed confusion over whether or not if he's a medium for some kind of outside source or if something much more sinister is at play. When speaking of actually selling his soul, Ozzy had some less than comforting things to say. He said, quote, "I already have. Well, you sell your soul to the devil when you do something yourself that you shouldn't, and I already have. I've lived my life to the fullest. If there's an afterlife, I've got a good spot in the furnace. You know?" In our number 6 spot today we have Post Malone. Good old Posty has probably one of the most famous celebrity haunting stories, and it all started with a visit to ghost hunter Zach Bagans' museum. Within the museum was an old wine box that is said to hold a Dybbuk, which in Jewish mythology is a malicious demon. This box had had come to the museum after the previous owner bought it on eBay and had some really horrible things happen to him and his family afterwards. These included reports of him having really horrific nightmares, and this extended to anyone else who touched the box, and sometimes even those who had just been around it. Even worse, his own mother had a serious medical emergency after he had given this box to her. This is all to say, the haunted item showed up in the Bergen Museum, and then 2018 rolled around and Post Malone decided to take a haunting tour of the occult collection. During this tour, Post Malone reached out and touched the box, and well, he has been dealing with the consequences ever since. These are said to include the same horrific nightmares detailed by the box's previous owner. In our number 5 spot today, we have Bob Dylan. Not necessarily who I really expected to put on this list, but there was an interesting interview back in 2014 that made many people speculate that the musician might have actually sold his soul. In the interview, he was explaining that he owes his years of fame and success to a deal he made. The interviewer asked, "Why are you still out here?" To which Dylan replied, "It goes back to that destiny thing. I made a bargain with it. You know, long time ago, and I'm holding up my end." The interviewer, of course, had to follow up on that cryptic message, so he said, "What was your bargain?" And he replied, "To get where I am now." The interviewer asked, "Should I ask who you made the bargain with?" And he replied, "With the chief commander." The interviewer clarified, "On this earth?" To which he answered, "In this earth and in a world we can't see." I can totally see why some people decided to draw their own conclusions from this. I mean, it sounds like he's basically speaking in riddles, so while he doesn't outright say that he sold his soul, some believe that this is what he was trying to say in that interview. In our number 4 spot today, we have Mike Colter. You might know Mike Colter as he plays Luke Cage in the MCU, but what you might not know about the actor is a very ghostly encounter that he had. Back in 2019, Mike was on Kelly Clarkson's show, and while on the show, he had an eerie tale for the audience when he said, quote, "I'm from the South, and there's a lot of things that happened in the South that don't happen anywhere else." Of course, Kelly inquired further, and that is when the star revealed a reoccurring moment that he claims happened, quote, "night after night." His mother basically explained it to him as a spirit being attracted to his energy. He said, quote, "When I was a kid, I used to have this thing that was sitting on my chest when I would sleep, and it was keeping me from getting up, and I couldn't open my eyes, and I would struggle." I don't know about you guys, but that sounds absolutely horrifying. I know a couple demons that could match up with that. Maybe it's a sleep paralysis demon, who knows. In our number 3 spot today, we have Vanessa Hudgens. Just last year, in April of 2022, Vanessa appeared on the Kelly Clarkson show. I guess everyone's just on the Kelly Clarkson show talking about their paranormal experience. And during this appearance, she spoke about having, quote, "a lot of paranormal encounters over the years." She said, quote, "I kind of shut it down for a while because the unknown is scary, but I recently was like, no, this is a gift and something that I have the ability to do, so I'm going to lean into it." Expanding on how she is leaning into these abilities, she explained that she had actually recently completed her first real paranormal investigation. Now we have Ed, Lorraine, and Vanessa. During this investigation, she said she met a very playful ghost at the site of a cemetery. I mean, I guess it's not like a malicious spirit. She said that she was able to speak to this ghost using a spirit box, and that after introducing herself, the ghost replied and repeated the names back to her. Maybe this year we'll see Vanessa diving even further into the paranormal, the occult, and all of these otherworldly beings. In our number 2 spot today, we have Courtney Cox. Back in March 2022, former Friends star Courtney Cox shared a harrowing experience she had that led her to go as far as to sell her house. She said, quote, "I didn't believe at first, but I lived in this house in Laurel Canyon, which is in LA, obviously, and it was Gypsy Rose Lee's house and Carole King's." She went on to say, quote, "So Carole King came over to my house and she said that there had been a divorce that was really ugly and that there was a ghost in the house. And I was like, yeah, whatever. But other people would stay there with me, like friends of mine, and they said they felt an encounter with a woman who was sitting on the edge of the bed." Despite these tales from her friends and even doing an actual seance with Carole, Courtney still wasn't really a believer of the supernatural. This all did eventually change, however, and it happened when a UPS worker came to her house. Quote, "I was at the house one day, not being a believer. The doorbell rang. It was a UPS guy or something, and I opened the door and he said, 'Do you know this house is haunted?' And I go, yeah, why? Why do you think that? And he goes, because there's someone standing behind you. And I was like, let's sell. She said she quickly put the house up for sale. She said she quickly put the house up for sale after that, and that she, quote, couldn't sleep there alone ever again. And finally, in our number 1 spot today, we have Cynthia Rowley. So there was a show called Celebrity Ghost Stories, and in an episode, Cynthia Rowley showed up to share her haunting tale. The designer recalled a spooky tale that took place at her estate, which is located in Greenwich, Connecticut. She explained that there was a, quote, ghost-like feeling in the house, which certainly is an eerie feeling, but soon a feeling turned into something a little bit more tangible. Eventually, Cynthia began seeing a sort of apparition in the corner of a room in the home. This apparition appeared as a woman who was wearing a sort of scarf over her face. This is all chilling enough, but things only got worse when Cynthia had to escape a fire in her home. She did, thankfully, and was fine, but then the local fire chief told her something she hadn't previously known. The woman who once owned the home she now lived in was called the, quote, Diamond Match heiress who was badly burned in a blaze. Seems like Cynthia may have been haunted by the previous owner of the house, and not just in like a tacky decor kind of way, I mean like for real haunted.
Number 10, Legion. Jesus encounters a possessed man and calls on the demon to emerge, demanding to know its name, which is an important element of traditional exorcism practice. He finds the man is possessed by a multitude of demons who give the collective name of Legion. So yeah, this demon is made of countless evil spirits able to incarnate into a physical body or separate into their respective forms at will. While the types of demons that make up Legion is unknown, they are said to be the same kind of demon that would inhabit a host and would have a single hive mind. Speaking of which, the demons of Legion do act like a hive mind, always speaking in unison and always knowing what the other demon is thinking and preparing to do. Legion appears as a floating sphere that is protected by an outer shell composed of massive innumerable humanoid bodies. This enormous lump of flesh conceals an inner core whose identity can vary. Legion, when possessing a human body, begins to torture the psychological person, making them have depressive and negative thoughts to erase any desire of life from its hosts. Their attitude of possessing human bodies is seen as a horrible act to most angels, as it deprives humans of their only weapon, free will. Number 9, Furfur. Furfur, also known as Furcifer, is a demon who is said to be the Count of Hell, leading 26 legions. He speaks in a hoarse voice, has a fiery tail, and usually appears as a stag. He is said to be able to make men and women fall in love, and also has command over great storms. He gives true answers to all things past, present, and future, but he must first be commanded to enter a magic triangle, for if not, he will lie and deceive the conjurer. But if he enters the triangle, he will answer truly and gladly speak about divinity, the creation of the world, himself, and other fallen angels. He can also destroy all the conjurer's enemies by burning them up. And if the magician requests it, he will not suffer temptations from any spirit or in any form. Furfur can also supposedly be called upon when a mortal wishes to take vengeance on other demons. This is likely included in his capability to destroy the conjurer's enemies. And I just gotta say, how scary can a demon be if its name is literally Furfur? It sounds like a name someone would give their cat. Number 8, Beelzebub. Beelzebub is a former Serphian turned into high-ranking demon who is considered one of the 7 princes of hell and oversees the Order of the Fly. In Catholic demonology, he is sometimes considered to be one of the first 3 angels to fall from heaven, along with Lucifer and Leviathan. He is also often confused with Satan, and the 2 names can be interchanged. However, strictly speaking, they are 2 separate entities. Beelzebub is the chief lieutenant of Lucifer and is one of the most loyal. He is commonly described as placed high in the hierarchy of hell and is seen as being associated with envy. He is also the prince of false gods, and flies play a large focus in imagery detailing him. The malignant spirit can even take the form of flies, according to some. I mean, ever heard of Lord of the Flies? Yup, that's him. Number 7, Mammon. Mammon in the New Testament of the Bible is commonly thought to mean money, material wealth, or an entity that promises wealth and is associated with the greedy pursuit of gain. After the rebellion in heaven, Mammon was banished to hell, where he is the one who finds underground precious metals that his demonic companions used to build their capital city, Pandemonium, by Lucifer's order. Mammon counsels the devils to be happy with what they've got and to create a home for themselves in hell. He is one of the 7 princes princes of hell, each representing the 7 deadly sins. Mammon represents greed and is known as the treasurer of hell, and was said to have had dealings with the Greek deity Zeus. It is thought that when you make a deal with the devil for wealth and fame, you are making it with Mammon. Number 6. Belphegor. Belphegor is a demon lord that presides over the sin of sloth and is one of the 7 princes that rules hell. He also assists people to make discoveries. For example, he seduces people by suggesting to them ingenious inventions that will make them rich and they wouldn't have to work hard for it. As one of the fallen angels, Belphegor was originally a member of the Order of the Principalities, and after his fall, he became a demonic counterpart to one of the 10 Sephiroth that oversee the Tree of Life. He is the biblical enemy of the 6 Sephiroth, the patron angel of beauty. It's said that if Belphegor were to become too influential in the world, then the beauty of it all would become tainted, causing ruination. Number 5. Leviathan. Leviathan became a demon of darkness and chaos and a leader of hell mentioned in the Book of Enoch. Leviathan is one of Lucifer's arms and one of the many faces of the devil in Christianity. He is also the representation of the sin envy. Leviathan is a tamer of beasts, a beast collector, and an excellent strategist. He has the power to summon hellish whales that are natural inhabitants of hell and use them in battle. Leviathan appears as a huge sea beast, a very powerful species of a sea serpent dragon. This form is so colossal that it's said to be capable of frightening the bravest of men and is capable of swallowing fishing boats and even ships. Its scales are several small teeth throughout its body, similar to a shark's body. Now, in his human form, Leviathan appears as a handsome young man in his late teens. Although the appearance is similar to a human, he has fish gills on his neck and his ears are pointed. He also has a small shark-like teeth that are hidden under a thin layer of skin in his mouth. Like his name suggests, he is a very jealous person, with Lucifer often being the target though. It should be noted that Leviathan's jealousy isn't limited to only him, so you should watch out.
Wow, you made it to the end of this video. Want to binge some more most amazing content? Yes, you do. Check out this video next. It's about real Bigfoot sightings that are confirmed genuine from real experts. Click the video now to find out more. See you guys in the next video.